Well, it's certainly an iconic American novel, and it is truly an honor to be a part of that literary tradition. I think that the storytelling has evolved and shifted, and the story has grown, and I think we're telling a version of it with this film, and I think it's really beautiful, and I'm really proud of it. I think the novel is definitely from Buck's perspective as well. I mean, he's our hero, and we put ourselves in his place as he becomes his truest and best self. And I think that this film shows that in a really magical and beautiful way. Certainly, Christopher Sanders, our director, is full of magic and awe and wonder. And I think that this captures that spirit of possibility. Terry Notary is such a skilled actor. So he's worked with Cirque du Soleil, he has all of this experience doing Planet of the Apes. If he's running on all fours and you catch him in your peripheral vision, you think there's a dog there. And he brought this soulfulness that I think really comes through in this, in working, of course, with the VFX team. There's a soulfulness that comes through in Buck, and that's a testament to his acting ability, truly. I hope that audiences take away a sense of wonder. I hope that it's inspiring to the next generation. I think there's a certain reverence for the natural world that is really beautiful. There's a sense of fantasy and magic.
Oh, well, that was my wife, Jess, that found him. We were we were many months into filming, and we had not found Buck yet. We had live-action counterparts for every dog except for Buck. And Jess was looking through Pet Finder. The reason we couldn't find him is because he's a very specific mix of breeds, as described in the book. Jess was looking through Pet Finder, and she saw a dog at a Kansas animal shelter, and his name was Buckley. And she said, this is the exact combination that the dog in the movie is. Not intending to cast the film, she drove 2 days to Kansas, came back with Buckley. She paid $25 for him. And she walked onto set, and everybody said, that's the lead. So we scanned him, and we rigged him, and here he is. Yeah. It's the first time we've ever done the entire story from beginning to end. Every prior version of Call of the Wild has only done the last 30 pages. This gave us an opportunity not only to have Buck's entire story told, but Terry made it a unique situation because we could work out scenes, in a sense, with Buck before we shot them. This would be the first time anybody could really interact with the star of this film beforehand. Otherwise, we either had a dog or a series of dogs that were trained to do a certain thing. But in this case, we had a dog that we could talk to. He's not a dog, he's a man. But yeah.
To have the technology that we do now and the brilliant minds who are in post-production day in and day and night for a year and a half making this film, it's pretty impressive. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the dog looks like first and foremost, you know. Terry is the most brilliant thing I've ever encountered. I mean, he is so phenomenal at being a dog, which sounds like the strangest sentence, but he brings this energy, this, sort of goofy personality, and he's not method, so he's not in character at all times, but he continues to personify this animal that is loving and giving, and he carries that around with him on set. So he's a human when the camera's not rolling. When the camera's rolling, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, you're a dog. It's really impressive. Oh boy, if you love dogs, I think you have to see this movie. I mean, for me, I grew up with a dog. I think most people who worked on this film grew up with a dog, and I think it's just one of those films that you feel the companionship and you feel what it feels like to have someone that's not a human who cares about you and loves you unconditionally no matter what you do and no matter who you are. And I think to me, that was why it was a no-brainer to be a part of this film, and I'm just so proud and honored. The first time I encountered Harrison Ford, it was this surreal moment because I thought I knew what to expect, and then I meet him, and it's just like, oh my, you are like my childhood. You're everything from Han Solo to Indiana. I mean, everything that I grew up wanting to be was him, and to meet him was pretty special. And then watching Harrison work was the real special thing, because there are moments when you're acting with him and you feel, okay, this is great, I'm working with an actor, and then you go into Video Village and you watch him on camera, and you're like, oh my God, this guy is everything. So it was a really surreal experience for me.
I think what stood the test of time about this story is the fact that what Buck represents is the best in all of us. It's a story about the travails and the difficulties and all of that Buck has had. And like the best of all people, he manages to come through it. He always has hope. He always sees the best in everybody, and he never loses faith. And I think that's what the story is really about. Well, we never really entertained the idea of anybody else. I knew Harrison a little bit, his love of nature, his attachment to nature, all of his philanthropic stuff has to do with conservation and so on. And I could think of nobody better to sort of be the man's man that Thornton was. And I think so much of Harrison's persona and the roles that Harrison has done and who Harrison is speaks to this character so well.
It's endured for over 100 years. It's never been out of print, the book, Call of the Wild. And I think it's because of the relationship we have with animals and how important animals are in our lives, and the companionship, especially of dogs, that we enjoy. But it's also a story about nature, and it's about the trials and tribulations of a human life. And it's about a lot of things, and it's fun. It's a great family movie. I'm very happy about the way it turned out. We had a stand-in for Buck in the person of Terry Notary, who's a talented actor and a Cirque du Soleil gymnast, who's able to replicate the movement of dogs. And he gave us an organized eye line so everyone knew where the dog was. And for me, he provided an emotional storytelling partner, and he was brilliant at it, and I owe a lot to him. Very grateful to have had him. We were very lucky.
A lot of people have a relationship with this book. Some people get it assigned to them, and some people are lucky enough they get it as a gift. My grandfather gave me a copy of this book. Actually, he gave my older brother a copy of this book, and it sat unread for like a good decade until one day at 13, 14, I picked it up, and I looked at the pictures, and I put it down. And then one day at 15, 16, I read it, and it stayed with me, and my grandfather told me it was his favorite book. And then something happens, sometimes you get lucky and you're cleaning out your old room many, many years later, and you find that copy again. And I did. And I remembered the experience of reading it, and it stayed with me. And we thought, it's time to tell that story again. I wonder if we can. The movie's an adaptation of a classic. The book is a wonderful book. Everyone should read it. If you haven't, go home, read it right now. Stop watching this. And you have to find its shape and find what's the story within it that we want to tell now. And we really just stayed with the tale of Buck and his ascension and growth from puppy to a wolf. And we just found that it was a very moving story that spoke a lot about parenting, fathers, sons, children, parents, and how we all are raised by our environments if we're lucky to become the best version of ourselves. When I started writing this one, I had no conception of what would be possible. I just said, let's tell the best story we can with a non-speaking canine protagonist and see if we can feel the human story inside that, because we connect to dogs. And I had no sense of practicality about how we'll actually do that, because if you think practically too soon, you won't even get past page 1. And then when the thing was done and people said, this is kind of good, maybe we should make this, we had to think very seriously about how are you going to make it. And very early on we realized that there's no real artistic or ethical way to make this with live dogs. That for Buck to be the star of this film, we needed to be able to modulate his performance as we would an actor. And so one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life on a set was the performance of the actor playing Buck in motion capture, Terry Notary, the great Terry Notary, performing the role, which was then painted by the brilliant VFX team on this, making it all real. So it's one of those wonderful things where you just have to be incredibly impractical so that brilliant people can come in and be practical later.
I'm just hoping that this film will get young people to discover for the first time, and for older people to rediscover the amazing works of Jack London, you know. I used to work with animals. I used to do horses and stuff in the movies. That's how I started. And, you know, they're not always the easiest to work with, you know. And when I first met Terry, I mean, he was amazing. I mean, he was the dog. You know, he came up and introduced, he says, "Hi, I'm Buck the dog." And I went, okay, you know. But I mean, he would get down, he would look at you, you know, he would get up on the table. And, you know, after a while, I mean, I just looked at him like he was the animal. Well, it's an old-fashioned story. You know, I'm a fan of storytelling. You know, there's a lot of car chases and, you know, and big explosions, but this is an old-time story about the bond between a man and an animal. You know, it's a classic tale. I think this one is a little more faithful to the book.
Terry Notary, my friend. So I met Buck during the screening for the first time, but my real partner was Terry Notary. He's a great actor and a great gymnast, and you cannot acting with all this hybrid technology without him. So he's the key. He's the key for us actors, and even for all the cameras, everything. The key is Terry Notary. Harrison Ford is, I think, the best actor we have on earth, and he has everything for that. He's the old, you know, soul and very, very strong character, and I think no one else can act like that with that Buck, you know. So I think he was the perfect cast for that. If you know the book, you're gonna love going back and see how it takes place, and have images, you know, and compare to what you had in your mind. And if you don't know the book, you're gonna love that, and maybe you're gonna read the book after that. It's a wonderful journey, and it's a beautiful movie.
I studied my dogs in the backyard. I got the job, and I was like, I gotta really figure out how dogs work. You know, you have dogs and you just love them, but when you really look into how they, you know, interpret information and how you really realize how like sensitive they are. They read everything, you know. So it was kind of an interesting, and they move totally differently than apes or any other animals that I've ever played. So it was a totally different experience, but it was really fun because Buck has this amazing arc. He starts off as this big sloppy, goofy puppy, and then gets beaten down, and then all of a sudden he falls into himself. He becomes this. It's the coming of age story for a dog, really, you know. And it's interesting how they interpret energy. Like they read you, they read all of you at once. Inflection, energy, and so it's interesting. You learn a lot about yourself as a human being, like how we don't interpret everything all at once like dogs do. But for Buck, that's what I learned, at least. So it was cool. I mean, it was a dream, really. It was just my job was to listen to him, and to be there, and to be his dog. It was really cool, you know. It was a dream. It was really fun. I grew up on this story as a kid. It was one of my favorite books. It's an adventure story. It involves, you know, our favorite animal, our dogs, and it's about discovering gold, but really discovering who you are, and finding the wild again, and allowing yourself to be free, and you know, Thornton saves Buck, but Buck saves Thornton at the same time, you know. So it was kind of this really nice relationship that we got to find as we were working together. It was fun. I hope they see a heartfelt movie that has, you know, a good message about you know, being true to yourself, and really, you know, finding happiness inside, not looking for it anywhere else, but finding it, in yourself first, not looking out past yourself to find something that will make you happy.